Hi, my name is Rod and welcome to the Arka Boat Shop. I do repairs, restorations on small wooden boats, build new boats, and sell online lots of parts and pieces for home builders who are doing either new builds or restorations of their own. So please check us out on the website at orcaboats.ca with a link right down there in the description. In this video, I'm going to be making the hatch lips. So it's the surface to which the actual lid will sit on. And here I'm making them out of 1/8 Luan ply or basic door skins. So let's go through the process. I'm going to quickly cut out some rough circles larger than the opening itself. So here I'm just trimming them up on my bandsaw to clean up the edges. So for both of the hatches, I've cut out two of these rings from 1/8, just door skin ply, doesn't have to be marine ply. It's all going to be sealed up with epoxy. So the objective here is with the two thin layers of 1/8 of an inch thick, we'll add up to 1/4 of an inch thick, and when they're put underneath the deck in this fashion, and then the third layer will go on, so 1/4 of an inch down. The purpose being is when the lip that the lid actually sits on is lowered by the 1/4 of an inch, that gap will be filled in with the 1/4 inch thick gasket, bringing the lid flush with the top of the deck. I have put everything together where I think it best fits, trimmed here and there, and just made some marks around here so when I put some epoxy on, I'll know exactly where it's going to fit. So when I put it into here with the thicker layer on, wider layer on first, I've also marked around on the edges here so I can just line it up. I want to make sure that both of these layers are extending into the opening, because I will then be once they're glued in, I'll be taking a flush trim router bit and trimming it back flush with this edge. The first two layers of the hatch lip are in, and now I need to trim them back flush with the cutout itself. So I've just set myself up with my laminate trimmer here. I've got a flush cutting bit with a bearing guide on top so it can ride, and it's set just enough so it'll ride along the deck and trim the plywood. So as we put this in, the underside area that gets glued to the underside of the boat gets less, and the amount showing on the inside of the hatch opening gets greater. Now this is much greater than we really need. It's going to be cut back after glassed and epoxy coated, and the lid will just sit nicely right on top of there. So I have a faint line on there that I drew of the actual opening, but I'm going to get rid of that because my luck is with clear epoxy on there, that pencil line will end up showing up. And then we'll do the same thing, and that is put a little bit of thickened epoxy around the very edge and clamp it in place. Okay, so I've just put a little bit of epoxy around the very outer edge here, and I'm just going to position this in so that I have approximately the same amount of lip showing on the inside. Now it's pretty deep. So I gotta be making sure that my clamps will reach. So I'm just checking to make sure that it's pulled up all the way around. And then I'm going to go through and clean up all that squeeze out. If I don't get that thickened epoxy out of there now, it's going to be a real bear to get into that corner and sand, not to mention that I'll end up kind of scratching up the surface of the very thin veneer ply. With all 3 layers of the 1/8 ply glued onto the underside of the deck, it's a little rough. I'm just going to take my sander now with some very rough 40 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to grind down all of these edges here to make a bit of a smoother transition. And there's still a little bit of a rough edge between layers. I'm going to coat this in fiberglass, so I want to make sure that it's nice and smooth. People will run their hands under here. We don't need any sharp edges. So I'm just going to slop on some epoxy with some microlite filler on there. And I will smooth it out and push it in all of the cracks. With that little bit of filler hardened up, I'm just going to give it another scuff sanding, and then I'm going to fiberglass the bottom of this and just epoxy coat the top side. I've laid down a scrap piece of 4-ounce fiberglass on the top here, just putting it onto the deck a little bit, and then we're just going to saturate this. This again is maybe one of those cases where it might be overkill, but I can't imagine what anybody would have to do to break the lip on the boat here. It's pretty solid as it is. So that's the main thing here. Making sure that that plywood does not change shape. Now that I have the underside got the glass on, I'm just going to use the excess epoxy to coat the top side of the hatch lip, making sure I get right in those corners there and saturate the edges of the cedar strips, which will take up a lot of epoxy. So no glass on the top side, don't think it's necessary, but we need to waterproof all of this. So I would think probably 3 to 4 coats of epoxy on all of these edges. The last step in preparing the hatch lip is to scribe around here. Now what I've done is just create a little space a little over 3/4 of an inch long, because there'll be 2 sets of gaskets in there, 3/8, so we're probably about 7/8 of an inch of a lip from the edge. So I just put the masking tape down, make it easier to see. And then I'll cut this out with my jigsaw. So all that's left now is to clean up the edge of the lid itself, seal all the edges with multiple layers of epoxy, the edge of the plywood here, and any rough edges on the inside of the deck. And again, as always, thank you very much for watching. And hey, if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. and maybe consider becoming a subscriber, because lots of videos coming out of the shop as new builds happen and restorations are undertaken.